As we pursued No Place Left, reaching every tribe, tongue, and nation with the gospel of Jesus Christ, there's an important principle that we're using in making disciples and developing leaders, and we call this MAWL. It's an acrostic for Model, Assist, Watch, and Launch. So let's take a look at Jesus' ministry and see how he molded the 12. Model, assist, watch, and launch. Let's go to Mark 3, verses 14 and 15. And he appointed 12 so that they would be with him, and that he could send them out to preach and to have authority to cast out the demons. So Jesus chooses the 12, they're with him, and he's going to eventually send them out to preach and cast out demons. Now let's look at what Jesus was doing for the disciples before he actually sent them out. In Matthew 4:23, Jesus was going throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every kind of disease and every kind of sickness among the people. So Jesus was he was modeling exactly what he would eventually send the 12 out to do. So modeling is the art of showing people how to do something versus telling them to do something. It's a demonstration. Usually we are heavy on the explanation, and we really need to be heavy on the demonstration, modeling. Next is assist. And we're going to look at Mark 9:14 through 29. I'm going to summarize the story for you. Jesus had just finished the transfiguration on the top of the mountain with Peter, James, and John, and they were headed down, and they see this large crowd, and the disciples that had been left were trying to cast out a demon from a man's son, and they were unsuccessful. They were failing. So Jesus comes in, casts out the demon, and then the disciples say, "Hey, why couldn't we do that?" And Jesus says, "This kind cannot come out by anything but prayer." And so Jesus assists them in casting out the demon. And as we make disciples, we will model for them and then have them try their hand at the ministry skill or character trait or whatever we're trying to instill in the disciple, and assist them as they try to do or perform the task or be the kind of person that a disciple needs to be. So we've modeled and we have assisted. Now we move on to watch. And quite frankly, this is the hardest one to see in Jesus' ministry. And so I would consider this a best practice more than an example of Jesus' ministry, but I think he did it. In John 4:1 through 3, we see that the disciples are baptizing, and I would imagine that Jesus is watching them do that. In John 6:5 through 6, Jesus is going to test Philip, and he wants to see how he will respond. And that's what watching is all about. It's an assessment of how the disciple is doing. So we've modeled for them, we've assisted, and now we're going to assess, we're going to watch to make sure that they either know how to perform the task or be the kind of person that they need to be as a disciple. You'll notice that I'm not just talking about ministry skills. Mauling people has to do with the whole of life. So I might model, assist, watch, and launch in the area of integrity, or in the area of raising children or a good marriage. So mawling doesn't just pertain to ministry skills. It covers all the areas of discipleship. And now we come to launch. And we're going to look at Matthew 9:35 through the end of the chapter 38. And then we're going to jump right into Matthew chapter 10. Jesus was going through all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. Seeing the people, he felt compassion for them, because they were distressed and dispirited like sheep without a shepherd. And he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Therefore, beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest." Notice this passage is almost exactly like Matthew 4:23, almost word for word. So Jesus has been doing the exact same thing over and over again as he models for the disciples. And now he tells them, hey, the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. Pray. But it's not just pray. There's a very unfortunate chapter break between Matthew 9 and 10 because the story continues. Verse 1 of chapter 10. Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. Jump down to verse 5. These 12 Jesus sent out after instructing them, "Do not go in the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter any city of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Freely you received, freely give." Jesus commands them to do exactly what he had modeled, assisted, and watched them do, and now he's launching them. It's important to note that once Jesus launched the apostles or disciples, he didn't just launch them and then had nothing to do with them. They came back and they did a debrief and they talked about it, and Jesus launched the 70 later. So it's important to note that the disciple maker is not done once he's model, assist, watched, and launched. They come back and continue their training.